Hey, everyone. I'm your host, James Jackson, and this is ARCast. Join me each episode as we shine the spotlight on a category management or shopper insights professional doing compelling work in the trenches. If you're ready, let's dive right in. Hey, I'm here with Bill Gillispie. He is a grocery industry vet and is now a part of Intent AI, and he's also doing some other projects as well. But Bill, welcome to the show.
Thanks, James. We're glad to be here. Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. So, Bill, if you've listened to the podcast, we obviously go into detail with your career, but if you've also seen, we have a quick question at the beginning, something to get things started. So the question for you were around the industry in stores for 20 plus years, but I'm wondering how you thought that you could actually be good at tech.
Originally, I didn't think I could be.
Okay.
But Gretchen, my better half, convinced me to take the challenge. And then I quickly realized that I could be good at it. And what it comes down to, James, is you have three experiences within the business. You have a customer experience, associate experience, and a vendor experience.
Mm.
And if you always focus on those, start with the customer first and your associate. And we tend to skip the vendor, but you got to focus on the vendor at some point. Technology just enables us to better improve those experiences. And I was an expert at those three areas, those experiences. I knew how they work, the process behind them. And then I also knew how to enable technology to make it even work better. And then as I switched from grocery over to IBM, I had a bunch of great technology people that could help me better improve that customer, associate, and vendor experience.
Wow, great answer. It's almost like you practiced that. All right. Well, you might have said that a couple times, but
Yeah.
but nice. We'll get more into that experience in a few minutes. But Bill, I think we're ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's roll.
Okay, let's get in the trenches.
In the trenches.
You went from a career where you built yourself as a grocery merchant working at retail to someone in tech working on retail. And so you've seen a lot. What are things you've seen tech impact for the good? And then where are areas that you think the old way is still the way to go?
Well, probably the biggest impact is around that customer and associate experience. Retailers, if you look at Walmart, you look at Wegmans, you look at H-E-B, they understand those experiences very well, and they've used today's technology or the technology over the last 20 years to continuously improve it. Whether we started back with just simple data to better understand our customers, to today's world of AI, to really get in deep to where the customer is, to predict where the customer is going to go. Companies that have succeeded with technology have applied it back to that customer, associate, and vendor experience. And they look to improve it. And they're always constantly thinking about how do I improve it. It's the old philosophy. When I started at Jewel-Osco, we had a simple philosophy. 60% of your time is spent doing your job, 40% is spent reinventing it. And so we were continuously thinking about what's the next step? How can we always do it better? Companies that have succeeded there have focused on that customer, associate, and vendor experience and applied technology against it. Where the good old way still works, or where people, a little bit differently, where people have failed, we have spent hundreds of $millions on technology that hasn't worked because people have chased the shiny object. They haven't gone back to that customer or associate or vendor experience. They get enamored with this piece of technology. They spend millions of dollars on it, and then they try to back into how can I improve that customer experience, which really is about customer experience. You have a use case, you're building capabilities, how does it impact your profit and loss statement? Then you should look at the technologies that would enable that. They buy the technology first, and then they're like, oh my God, this doesn't work. How do I make it work? And it fails. So,
okay. That's super interesting. And so I asked that because obviously you're kind of at the intersection of both. You have the experience and you've seen both the good and the bad, but let's go back a little bit. How did you get started in the industry?
So my dad worked for Jewel-Osco for 41 years. He was in the retail operations. He was an executive. Ran 25, 30 different stores at a time. Wow. And then during the week, if I misbehaved during the week, he would take me to work with him. And my punishment was working all day on Saturday at one of his stores. So I was probably 10 years old when this started. And the first store was 87th and Dan Ryan, the old Jewel-Osco brand. He would drop me off at 7 a.m. My job was to fill the bread all day long. And he thought it was punishment. But what he didn't realize was I just fell in love with the business. The instant gratification. Fill the bread, it's gone. Fill more bread, it's gone. Build bigger displays, it's gone. I just fell in love with the business at a young age. And throughout my teenage years and even in the college, we spent a lot of time at his stores, and he would take me to work with him, and I learned the business very quickly.
Interesting. So you're learning the business, you're getting into your career, but I'm wondering, what was it like to have your dad in the industry? I mean, obviously he had a pretty significant role in Chicago, but what was it like having him in the same arena or venue as you were in?
Probably the biggest benefit was whenever we got together on the personal side, whether it was a barbecue or birthday or just hanging out, going to a Cubs game, our first discussion for an hour or 2 hours was always about the business, how I was doing, what I was going to do to improve it, what could we do as an industry to improve it. So we always talked business first. So it was almost like I had a business review with him each time. Hitting my numbers, right? Am I going to hit my numbers? Whether I was a store manager, category manager, even when I was a senior VP of marketing, merchandising at Save-A-Lot, numbers discussions always came up first. But we always talked about the business and how to make it better, where trends were going. So that was always the benefit. And then starting at such a young age, I just had an early jump start on a lot of people. The downside at Jewel in the beginning was a lot of people thought I got my promotions or my jobs because of my dad. A lot of people were resentful of that and held it against me or made it more difficult for me. Sure. I actually had one supervisor that said, "I don't care who your dad is, I'm going to kick your ass."
Oh, wow.
Right. And so you had some of that. I was a store manager at 24, and people thought you only got the job because of your dad. And what they didn't realize was, well, I was really doing this since I was 10 years old. And so a lot of this stuff, I've been working in the store since I was 10. So a lot of it came to me, but there were certain people out there that felt I only got it because of my dad. A couple of people held it against me and told me they were going to use it against me. And in the end, I won them over because they realized I really knew what I was doing. And I was good at this. It just wasn't the name that I had or that my dad was an executive of Jewel.
Wow, that is great. That is great. And I was going to ask you how did you handle those, but you touched on that. And so let me talk a little bit more about kind of the environment. So you talked about 87th and Dan Ryan. Not a horrible area, but there are also some tough neighborhoods in Chicago. Yeah. Did you ever have to deal with stores that were in some of those neighborhoods?
Yeah, so I was a store manager at 3 different places. Campus of IU, Bloomington, Indiana, wonderful experience. Highland Park, Indiana, which was a nice suburb. And then I went to 47th and let's call it Ashland. Bishop was the actual road. The old back of the yards neighborhood, half Hispanic, half African American. Average income per year was $9,000.
What?
At the time, it was the poorest neighborhood in Chicago, and the gangs ran the neighborhood. So when I first started, my security guard, Sergio, greeted me. He was in a bulletproof vest, had 2 guns, and my first day was about survival. I was never allowed to go out to the parking lot after dark. And he told me right away the gangs were going to test me. And my my second day, I was out there fixing some displays, and the gangs walked in and they started taking everything off the displays and breaking it on the ground. And Sergio prepared me for this because I was the big white guy in this neighborhood.
Yeah.
Sergio came up, diffused everything. I knew what to do. Just walk away. Sergio would handle it. But it was a different environment. So you had the roughness, the threat of your security and stuff like that. But I also learned a lot about, let's call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Food, clothing, shelter. And if you can't provide food, clothing, or shelter to your family, you just never move. You get stuck there. And poverty does breed poverty. Education is the biggest way out of it, but I learned the importance of helping other people at that time. And I was one of the first store managers, and I was threatening to lose my job, but I wouldn't throw out rotisserie chickens at the end of the night. We would give them away. Bread that would be thrown out, I wouldn't throw it out. I would give it away. My DM even came up to me and said, you're going to lose your job over this, and your dad won't be able to save you. And I said, Bob, I just can't throw this stuff out when people they're starving on the streets. And so nowadays it's acceptable, right? We give it away to charities and stuff like that. But it just taught me about when people are poor and don't have an opportunity, what happens to them. That's how they get sucked into the gangs.
Yeah.
They don't have a meal that day, James. And then all of a sudden the gang member walks up to a 10-year-old kid and gives them a bag of McDonald's and says, hey, stand on this corner. If you see 5-0, just give me a buzz. Back then it was a beaver. today it's a cell phone. And then a month later, they're getting a pair of Michael Jordan shoes. And then before they know it, they're sucked into the gang, right? So that whole, I always call it the Maslow hierarchy of needs, food, clothing, and shelter. I learned a lot about it and how to help people get out of it.
Wow. So I gotta go a little deeper on that. So the experience you had that second day on the job and then even thereafter, were you scared?
Oh yeah.
Or did you get, okay.
I was wondering, what the heck am I doing here? First I said, what did I do wrong to be sent to the store? Right? And then, but what Greg Josefowicz, who was the chief merchant, what he explained to me later was, I needed someone who understood store operations, but also the African American community, the Hispanic community, because we were terrible at it. So I spent maybe a year and a half in that store, understood the communities, what they were buying, how to relate to those people. And then they moved me into the office under merchandising and marketing so we could start this whole, what we call the Regna ad, which was the Hispanic ad, the African American ad, and then we also started the Polish ad because Polish has, Chicago is the second largest Polish population.
Versus next to Warsaw, yeah.
So it was a learning experience with James. There was multiple times times we got robbed, times the amount of shoplifting. I spent more on security in that store than I did on my grocery and front end payroll combined. But it's also an important lesson because at that time, even up until the early 90s, Jewel did not walk away from a neighborhood that needed a grocery store. So if you look back in the 80s, we weren't talking about food deserts in Chicago because Jewel kept the store there because it belonged there. We figured out how to operate it so that we could actually make some money. But also it was a firm belief of people like Bill Bolton and Greg Josefowicz that we needed to be in that community to serve the community.
Wow. That is amazing. That's quite a story.
Changed a lot since then, right? It's all been about profits and dollars and how we have food. But back then, it was a philosophy of Jewel, no doubt about it.
Got it. So talk about American stores. So you spent some time there. Can you go into detail on that?
Yeah. So after my store manager jobs, I went into the office, right? So now I'm in store management, in charge of promotions. And interesting story here. I'll get to the American stores in a second, but an interesting story here was Greg Josefowicz sat me down. He said, "There's one reason why you're here. You're one of them." I said, "What do you mean I'm one of them?" He goes, "I'm tired of getting yelled at by the stores because the ads are wrong or the display program is wrong. You're in charge of what goes into the ad. You're in charge of what goes on displays. And if it's wrong, it's your fault.
It's your fault." Got it.
But Greg started the foundation for me. He would always come down and talk to me. He would spend 5 or 10 minutes talking, then he would leave. Quick hits. Never forget the customer. It always starts with the customer. What are we doing for the customer? What's our strategy for the customer? So that was instilled in me. And in 1993, James, we did the first category business planning at Jewel. They won the first in the industry. I think it was right after Schnucks, but it was all around the customer. Now, a few years later, American Stores is starting to centralize all their independent operating companies. So Jewel, Acme, Star Markets, Osco, Save-On, Lucky, Terra up in the Northwest, right? And they wanted a small group of people to go out to Salt Lake City to start to centralize marketing, merchandising, and supply chain. And we're going to act as one company versus, I think it was 8 independent companies, leverage the cost, leverage the size to create a new company. And I was one of the 12 people selected to go. And Greg Josefowicz would say later, I think he sent 6 of the 12 people just from Jewel Osco. And he said, "I'm sending my best people because you're making decisions for this company moving forward. And I want to make sure you have our best interests involved in that. Plus, you're the smartest people we have, so we know you're going to do it right." So we were selected to start the whole process for the centralization, and we started off very small. I think we had 12 people to start with. We grew to 50 pretty quickly. But how would a company that is independently operated become centralized? We started with process. So this became my first learning in process mapping. Process looks like this today. So how's the process going to look in the future? What capabilities are we building? And it all goes back to that customer, associate, vendor experience. I've been saying this for a long time. What's the process? What's the capabilities are we building? And what's the data that we need? And then what's the technology that's going to support it?
Wow. So you mentioned category business plans at Jewel. Where did you learn category management then?
TPG, the partnering group, Brian Harris. So I don't think it was the partnering group back then. Brian was just starting. But we brought Brian in. And at the time at Jewel, in the category management department, we had 28 males. We had 1 female, Marcy Stipp. And then we had just hired Jean Spiegelhalter, who was a female from Kraft. And the idea was we needed to diversify. So she became the first female vice president at Jewel-Osco outside of HR. So
Wow.
actually a meaningful department, right?
Yeah.
Well, now you got 28 males and one Marcy Step on site at McDonald's, the university. We're being taught category management. Brian Harris is there.
Okay.
And so we're going to do one category. So Jean picked one category for all of us to learn. And she picked fem hygiene. Just
For 28 guys.
28 guys to understand the customer and stuff. But that was the starting point.
Yeah.
That really changed Jewel-Osco because at that time, Jewel-Osco had a similar market share to Dominic's. And Dominic's was continuing to gain, almost had the number one share, maybe a 1 percentage point difference. But now we were taught every category, what's the customer doing, right? Where do you want to take that customer? And then how do you differentiate so you can win? That was the secret. And if you look at Jewel today, Dominic's doesn't exist. But that was the foundation just set which built back in the early 90s.
Sure. So I'm hearing this, and then I see on your profile you decide to leave American Stores and go to Minneapolis.
Yeah, so actually I got fired. That's the first time of being fired.
Oh, okay.
So there was in the new company, there wasn't a job for me. So fell in love with, so I got fired. So fell in love with Super Value. We had a chance to meet the executives in Salt Lake City. Mike Jackson was one other key guy I met. He was president of the Northwest Wholesaling. And two things I really fell in love with was the people, Mike and everyone else that talked to us at this job fair. And then I realized I didn't know anything about wholesale. And here was an $18 billion wholesaler. And I wanted to learn the wholesale business. They did have some retail. But I joined them originally in wholesale for about a month. And then I moved over to Cub Foods.
Okay.
We started working at Cub.
So, I looked at the numbers. So you had, and this is on your profile, you were working multiple banners, 1,500 stores with American Stores, and you go down to 147 stores at Cub. What did that look like? How was that transition?
So here was the big challenge. What I was challenged with was at Super Value at the time, retail hated wholesale. Wholesale didn't talk to retail. So here we have an $18 billion company and we weren't leveraging our size. So at Cub Foods, one of the first things I did, more from the corporate perspective of retail in Cub Foods, we put our bakery business out to bid with wholesale. First time ever.
Oh, okay.
So I wasn't leveraging the size of Cub Foods, the 140 stores. I was leveraging the $18 billion.
Yeah.
Retail didn't trust wholesale. Wholesale didn't trust retail. And I think at one point, John Hooley said, if this doesn't work, I'm going to fire you. It worked because the wholesale guys, all they want to do is generate volume, right?
Yeah.
And to this day, we still talk about the French bread. We got a 19-cent cost on the French bread from Rich Bakeries that we never saw before. We used to pay 40 cents at Super Value. We got
my God.
Because we leveraged the size and we promised not to deduct. We promised not to fine vendors, but to grow the sales. And so the French bread became our ritual. And I was just having lunch with Kim Krause, who was the guy at Rich Foods who helped me put the deal together, 20 some years ago. We still talk about the French bread. But the goal was, James, leverage the size of Super Value. So we started there. Then we went to the meat department. We would purchase our meat separately from Super Value. Doesn't make sense. We're buying beef, right? So we all started to work it together as part of what we call the collective. And we didn't do all the categories, but we started to work much closer together. The next big one we did was with Dan Funk. Dan Funk, who's the president and CEO of AWG right now.
Yeah.
He calls me up and says he had the Midwest, like Ohio and those regions. He goes, Billy, it doesn't make sense for me to bid out my milk separately than you. Let's do it all as one. And then that was the second time John Hooley said, if this doesn't work, I'm going to fire you. And of course it worked, right? And then we saw milk costs we never saw before because our volume just doubled and the cost came down.
Wow. Can you talk about John Hooley for a minute?
You bet. So John was a visionary. And that's how Cub Foods got started. His, I believe it was his uncle who founded Cub Foods, but John was one of the key executives that brought it to how big it got, to the 80s and 90s, Cub Foods was dominating.
It was big, yeah.
And everyone knew about price, but John was a lot about product. It was product first. And then, so he always had these ideas. He was similar to the Jewel philosophy. He was always challenging us to do better. And to get deeper into, okay, what products do our customers need? Where are they going? But then at the same time, we have to sell it at the cheapest cost possible. Not cheap quality, but the lowest price. Yeah. And the way we did that is we always were taking costs out of the system. We weren't staffed heavily in the category management area or in the stores, right? You bagged your own groceries.
Yeah.
Take the costs out, find what product trends were happening, and then
Mm.
you could actually start. That's how you differentiate between product and the lowest prices. He came back. He left when for about 2 years, and then he came back because Cub Foods was in trouble. And
Mm.
he actually turned around Cub Foods for a second time, and that's we focused on product. James, one time he called me up and he goes, Bill, he goes, I'm at Mayo Clinic getting a physical. And so different things pop into my head. Okay, you're getting
Mm-hmm.
a Mayo Clinic, but you're calling me. He goes, I just met this guy from Excel up there up in Minnesota, and he goes, they've invented a new feed that when fish like the tilapia fish eat it, the fillet is like 2 inches thicker than what it normally is. So it goes from like a half of an inch to an inch.
Uh-huh.
Well, at that time we had lost the orange roughy crop to overfishing and some other problems. He goes, tilapia is going to be the next orange roughy. I want you to work with this guy.
Oh, wow.
So we went to work. It was Excel, but it was Carbia was
Yeah.
a major company.
Yeah.
So, but John was always thinking about these ideas. How do we do stuff differently?
Mm.
Before you know it, we were selling mountain stream tilapia from Nicaragua, and we owned the tilapia market.
Wow. Wow. That is fantastic. And you talked about product, you talked about the customer. You've worked on a couple products, being here in Minneapolis. There's some of them that are still here today.
Yeah.
So can you talk about a couple of those projects that you worked on?
So here's where it started. So Ed McManus was, John Hooley was the president.
Uh-huh.
Ed McManus was running Cub Foods, and they both came to me and said, we want you to take over meat, seafood, and deli.
Mm.
And I said, I don't know anything about meat, seafood, and deli. And they said, precisely, but you understand the customer. You understand category management. You understand differentiation. We need to bring that over there. And at the time, so this is like 2000, 2001, James, at the time, our primary shopper was not buying meat from Cub Foods because we only bought the cheapest product. Our primary customer wasn't shopping our delis. They were going to Rainbow Foods and Kowalski's and Byerly and Lund at the time. So we had to change it. So we started with the first thing, we went out and talked to our customers. We gave customers the old-fashioned Polaroid cameras of the picture comes out.
Yeah.
He said, go into our stores, take pictures of what you like and what you don't like. And most of it was what they don't like. So in the deli case, it was dried out lunch meat because we pre-sliced everything. They told us about the fried chicken. It tasted terrible. It tasted like it was 7 days old.
Mm.
In the meat department, they talked to us about all they saw was blood and dirt and an uncleanly meat department. So from the customer research, we said, okay, now we got to focus on product first.
Mm-hmm.
So we started in the deli. We started meat and deli, but deli was probably the biggest one. So we started with, okay, we need to sell a premium lunch meat. And so we approached Boar's-Head, and Boar's-Head said, we'll never do business with Cub Foods or Super Value. And then I heard about this small company, actually Mary Jo Nelson. She said, I heard about this company called Dietz & Watson in Philadelphia. We should go see them. And we did, and we fell in love with the company. Their quality was actually better than Boar's-Head because they never had to freeze their meats. Boar's-Head had gotten so big that the freeze stuff, Dietz & Watson was still a good site, same quality. So we brought Dietz & Watson in. And then the big struggle there was you're not going to pre-slice it. We're going to ask for $9 a pound versus $4 a pound. So the change management training with our associates. And the way we did it was we let them taste the product.
Mm.
There was a London broil that was in a buffalo chicken. This is when buffalo was just starting to take off as a flavor. And so we would have these individual store trainings where they actually get to taste the product, take the product home and share it with their family.
Mm-hmm.
And they fell in love with the quality. So they became our biggest salesperson. Then we went after fried chicken. Our fried chicken, like the customers told us, tasted like it was 7 days old. It was frozen, came in. We would probably fry stuff in the same oil 10, 15 times, maybe 2 days in a row.
Oh, God.
So the whole program was wrong. And so we said, let's go after fresh. And everyone said, you can't do that at Cub Foods because we're a low price player. You're going to add labor back into the stores. But I said, Mary Jo and myself, we both believe if we did a fresh program, we could double, triple, quadruple the sales. And so we started off, what's the best chicken? And the best chicken program was actually Golden Plump out of Minnesota. So it became a dual brand strategy, fresh chicken, right? But then also from a Minnesota company that everyone just loved, right? Golden Plump. And then a lot of time trading. You change the oil every night. The oil is filtered maybe 2 or 3 times a day. You change the oil every night. Strict procedures around food safety and how to prepare the fresh chicken as far as the marinade, how long it stays out there. And then we won the people over again with let them taste it. and taste the difference, right? And it was a huge difference. And then it didn't add a lot of labor back into the stores, and the sales were just off the charts. Once we started, the sales were off the charts. And as we know today, Dietz and Watson and the golden, I don't know if it's still Golden Plump, but the fried chicken at Cub is still there.
Yes.
And it started back with the challenge of we got to do better, focus on the customer and the product, and take a little bit of a risk. And we did, and it worked out.
I told you at some point, I'm like, you're a legend and you don't even know it. But the fried chicken program at Cub, we were even talking to Zach. I mean, Cub is known for their chicken. It is the best.
Yeah, and it started back with Mary Jo Nelson and myself. We're just all talking, and really the whole team. How do we do something different? Let's prep for that chicken, right? Yeah.
So, as we go along in your career, there's a couple things that I do want to talk about. One is you've been doing a lot of things now at this point. You've gone Chicago to Salt Lake to Minnesota. You've done grocery, frozen, dairy, meat, seafood, deli. So you have a lot under your cap, and you're moving along in your career. Was there a point in time where you kind of had like an aha moment where you're like, yeah, I'm really good and I could really do something in my career? Did you ever have that?
I always wanted to be a vice president by the age of 40.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and the way my dad instilled in me, if you did a good job, he'd pat you on the back, but you can do better next time. Always this continuous improvement. James, I remember one time I'm out playing with the kids. I'm like 6 years old. I fall down. The kids pile on me. My arm's hurting. I come in the house. I said, Dad, my arm's hurting. And it was swollen. He goes, pats me in the butt and says, get back out there and play. There's nothing wrong with you. Mom comes home 3 or 4 hours later, looks at the arm, takes me to the hospital. It's broke. I'm doing a cast, right? And I always would tease him. I said, if you did that today, you'd be in jail. But that was what he installed in me. So always, and then when you went to work for Jewel, it's always the continuous improvement. So I always had this goal in my life. At 40, I had to be a VP. But throughout my career, I was always looking for, well, how can I do it better? How can I do it better? And that led to those promotions. Okay. Another philosophy I had said, if I had to move, I'd move. I was just so intrigued with living in a different area. I think I moved 13 times.
Wow.
The cool thing was I moved to a new area, met new people, new experiences, new food, new cultures, and that just excited me. So the move always excited me. And then I had this goal. I wanted to be a VP by 40. The day I turned 40, I get on the elliptical machine. I'm punching in my age. I wasn't a VP. I was so pissed off. And Mike Jackson, one of my early mentors at SuperValue, denied me the VP job. He said, you can do, it was vice president of private label. He said, you can do this job. He goes, but you're only taking it for the title. He goes, we have bigger plans for you. It's bigger than private label. So I was pissed at him. But then 3 months later, that's when I got my promotion to VP of marketing and merchandising for Cub Foods Chicago. And so I got to move again and finally hit that title. But there wasn't one point in time. I just had this path of where I wanted to go. And then what my dad installed in me in Jewel was always keep improving, always keep improving. So,
wow, that is awesome. And so you're having that experience, and I'm not sure, so I could be off on the timing, but at some point you did have some health concerns. Is that correct?
Yeah. So 1999. So when I went to Minnesota, I went to SuperValue, got there in March, and then in that fall I got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. A bunch of things were going wrong. One day I wake up, I can't feel anything below my waist.
Oh, God.
Yeah, it was difficult to walk. A couple weeks later, lost the hearing in my left ear. And then a couple weeks later, I had vertigo. Everything spun left on me. And doctors couldn't figure it out. One doctor told me it was psychosomatic and gave me a book to read. But then I found, the biggest thing I learned, James, is you have a choice with doctors. And so I found a doctor who actually could help me. He was a primary care doctor, and he did some more MRIs, and he diagnosed me with MS. My first 3 MS doctors, multiple sclerosis, my first 3 MS doctors, different opinions. One guy said, quit your job, your life is over. Another person said, there's nothing you need to do. And another person I just didn't understand. But I heard about Dr. Barry Arneson in Chicago. They called him the godfather of MS at the University of Chicago. I got in to see him, spent 90 minutes with him and his team. It changed my life forever. And the first thing he told me, he said, Bill, you're in denial. You have MS, and we need to start treatment right away. He goes, you have 13 lesions on your brain stem, and on your spinal cord, mostly in your neck area. He goes, the disease progresses very quickly in males. And he goes, you have a large amount of lesions. Usually 2 is a lot. You have 13.
Oh, God.
He goes, so here's my advice for you. He goes, first of all, he said, every day you wake up, you have a choice. He goes, if you choose to be positive, I can help you. If you choose to be negative, this disease will eat you up and there's nothing I can do. It's a choice you will make every day for the rest of your life. Second thing he said was, learn as much as you can about the disease. It's going to scare you because you're going to read about people in wheelchairs, people that can't feed themselves. But your education will set you free. And then he was walking out the door. He turned around. He goes, you need to do something. I go, what do you mean do something? He goes, I don't know. You'll figure it out, but get involved. So the next year we started Team Gillispie. We raised $6,000. Since then, over the last 26 years, we've raised $2.5 million for people with MS.
Wow.
One of the greatest compliments I had was an MS researcher came up to me and said, you don't realize this, but you have changed the course of MS with the amount of money you've raised. One of the best compliments I ever had. So I was 35 when it happened, James, and I thought my life was over. And those next 2 years was very difficult. I just felt sorry for myself. Mm-hmm. Whenever you get a chronic illness, it's no different than a death. Mm-hmm. Denial, self-pity, anger, bargaining, and then you move on. I felt in the self-pity for 2 years, gained like 70 pounds. And then finally, I just jumped out of it. I had a friend come up, Jim Gillette came up. He worked for Gillispie from Chicago. And that Friday night, I said, what I was doing was I said, I can't do this because of MS. And so I really limited my life.
Okay, yeah.
So he comes up on a Friday night and I go, hey, I rented a couple movies from Blockbuster when you could rent movies from Blockbuster. Got a pizza coming. We're going to watch action flicks. And he goes, screw that. We're going out. And I love live music.
Okay.
I had to give up drinking. And I didn't think I could go to a bar, listen to live music and have fun. But he dragged me out to that bar. We stayed out till 2 a.m. in Minnesota. And I know it, at 2 a.m, you still want to go to Waffle House, whether you're drunk or not. We went to the Waffle House in Burnsville. And at that point, it realized to me, I changed my life forever because I said, I'm not going to say I can't do this because of MS. I'm going to do stuff and we'll see what MS happens, how it treats me. Changing point in my life.
Wow. That's quite a story. Okay. Wow. So you have that experience. You're still working. You've gone through that trials and tribulation period, 2 years. But you end up coming out of it, like you said, a different person, and you end up at Save-A-Lot, right? So what did you do at Save-A-Lot, now that you're kind of back on your feet, and how did you change the game there?
So I was in charge of, this is when Super Value bought Albertsons.
Yeah.
They asked me to go back to Super Value because I was very familiar with Albertsons, very familiar with Super Value. I started the grocery department. I was reporting to Rich Giuliano, and he reported to Duncan Martin. So we built the grocery team up there, and you were part of it with Chris Drays and everyone else. And then Mike Jackson just said, hey, I got a problem at Save-A-Lot. We haven't really had any growth in 3 years because we had 15 years of double-digit growth. The last 3 years have really declined. And they don't understand who the customer is. I need you to go down there and change it. And so I said, okay, hey, another promotion, another title, another new city. Let's go do it, right? So I hopped on it, and we went down to Save-A-Lot. And then here was a very proud organization because they had 15 years of double-digit growth. At the time, we were twice the size of Aldi. We had 1,200 stores. Aldi had 500. The exact same model. But growth had stalled, and what had happened, James, was we didn't know who our customer was. And I remember in the beginning looking at sales reports. They weren't sales reports; they were shipment reports because we were a wholesale model. We had 250 corporate-owned stores, but the other 1,000 or so were licensees.
Yeah,
we looked at shipment reports. We didn't look at sales. We had no segmentation. So what did we do? The very first thing that we did there is we started category management. But at a very different level because I only carried 2,000 items. 90% was private label, and I only carried one ketchup. I only carried one mustard, maybe two, right? So the category management process was very, very simple, but we just started with focusing on our customers, who was truly our customer. And probably the biggest challenge that I had there that was very, very dangerous, was just as dangerous as fresh fried chicken at Cub Foods, was I had to recreate the organization. I had to change this organization that had been around for 15 years. Ooh. And so we created the consumer department. Didn't call it a customer. I called it a consumer because what I was teaching everyone is a customer is someone who shops with us. Consumer is the whole population. More consumers in our stores, so they become customers. And so at the time, and I think you were part of this too, that we started the segmentation. We
Mm-hmm.
started segmenting our stores. We had 3 different segments, and we started marketing and merchandising towards those segments, which changed Save-A-Lot. The other big thing we did was we just got back to basics. One of your earlier questions, what really hasn't technology changed?
Right.
Technology hasn't changed the fact that your stores have to be clean, they have to be full, and you have to have good customer service. Right? Technology will never change that, right? It'll help improve it, but so we got back to that philosophy. We called it the merchant mindset, and we merchandise our stores for that particular week, for that particular customer. And very quickly, sales went from a -5 to 10%. This is 2008, right? Timing was good because the big crash was happening.
Yeah.
And the average shopper at Save-A-Lot made $40,000 a year. So think about this: feed a family of 4 on $88 a week back in 2008, and we were the perfect fit.
Yeah.
So we cleaned our stores. We started to change the merchandising. We focused on those segments and started merchandising and marketing to them. And then we saw some great trends, up 10%, up 8% the next year. And we were really hitting on all cycles. And in year 3, we opened up 98 new stores. We went from 1,200 to almost 1,400 stores, and the growth was just starting to continue for Save-A-Lot.
Sure. So you're at Super Value. You're working on Save-A-Lot. You do make a move, I think, at some point along the way, and you end up at A&P, right?
So I got fired for my second time.
Okay.
Bill Shaner was the president of Save-A-Lot, and I learned a ton from Bill, but we needed to make another change. And he thought that we had too much change. We had to sit back, and him and I weren't getting along. So I got fired. And then a bunch of old Jewel guys were heading out to A&P. A&P, we were going to take it into bankruptcy, emerge from bankruptcy, but create the Jewel Osco on the East Coast.
Okay.
So Tom O'Boyle was the chief merchant. Sam Martin wasn't a Jewel guy, but he was the CEO. And Sam, I knew Tom forever, right? So a bunch of us went out there, and I pulled a lot of people from Super Value to go out there with us to recreate A&P.
Yeah. So what happened there then?
So we got out of bankruptcy. So about 10 months into it, we're emerging from bankruptcy. Bankruptcy is a different beast. There's a lot of negativity and stuff like that. And that's when I got fired my third time.
Okay.
And a big mistake, you list your big mistakes in life. I took the job based on the paycheck. Not the fact that we're going to go into bankruptcy. It was going to be a different type of lift that you had there, different type of environment. And so I learned from that point, never take a job based on a title or based on, I could say I was in charge of 12 billion in sales or 8 billion in sales, whatever it was, and get double my pay, because that doesn't always work out. So Tom and myself, it was a mutual agreement. It wasn't working out. And then I left there. And then I was looking for my next gig. I almost went to 99-cent only stores.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had talked with IBM earlier, and I thought it was a crazy idea to go to IBM. But then I had dinner with Melissa Schaefer again, an old colleague who was at IBM. And she said, Billy, you should come work for IBM. Seriously, this time. And I go, you're crazy. I don't know nothing about technology. I know everything about green beans, fresh, frozen, and canned. And she goes, we need green bean people. We got plenty of technology people, but we don't have anyone who understands the business. We're stuck in the technology world, the CIO world, and we got to get across to marketing and merchandising, and you can help us do that. I was scared to take the job. I didn't think it would work, but Gretchen talked me into it. She just said, it's different, Bill. You can always go be a merchant, right? Just do it and move forward. So I did it. And the first couple of months, I almost quit because I went from an office to a virtual environment. So even back in 2012, IBM was virtual. I had PowerPoints and conference calls, video calls all day. And then I get a call from my boss. She says, hey, you need to be in Australia on Monday, which means you need to leave tomorrow. You're going to be there for 3 weeks. You're going to work with Woolworths, bring Gretchen. And then I was sucked in from that standpoint. And what was happening in grocery at that point was, do you sell groceries online or don't? Right? Everyone's still trying to make that decision. IBM had all the software for that. I had the consulting, the experience.
Yeah.
So helping companies sell online, get into social media.
Yeah.
How do you measure your social media impact? So that was the big explosion there. And then Watson had just made its debut on Jeopardy.
I remember you telling me about that. Yeah.
Champion. So Watson was the first AI tool that we could actually start to understand that customer or associate even better to make changes. So I was hooked at that standpoint. Within IBM, did business in 26 different countries. It was a great experience. And then about 4 years ago, did that for 10 years, then crossed over to Microsoft for about 3 years, and then started my own company about a year ago.
So can I ask you this? So you get out of retail and you go into tech. You're more in a consulting role in tech. What is it like to go from having the ability to pull a lever to trying to influence decision making?
It's a big change. All right. And this is one thing that Bill Shaner taught me at Save a Lot. And
Mm-hmm.
Greg Josefowicz was always big about this too. You can't make, if you force a decision on people, it usually fails.
Mm.
So you have to build the influence. You have to build the agreement. And Bill Shaner was big on this. Bill Shaner didn't want one person making decisions. He wanted a lot of people's input.
Okay.
And he always told me, Gillispie, if you're the only guy that has the ideas, sooner or later you're going to run out. And then and then what's the next idea? You want 20 people with ideas, 20 people in. So I learned a lot about that. But crossing over was a big change because you had to influence. I remember the first time a retailer at Loblaws canceled a meeting on me. I was like, what do you mean you're canceling a meeting on me? And I looked back and I said, well, how many meetings did I cancel on November before?
I was going to say you did that to them. Yeah.
Right? So it was a big eye opener. So you had to learn your influencing skills, big time skills. And IBM, that's what they built for me. So I understood the customer, the associate, how it worked. But what's the framework you put it into, which is, okay, understand those experiences. That leads into some type of use case. That leads into some type of capabilities. It's got to impact the P&L.
Sure.
Then there's got to be technology that actually that enables it. IBM taught me those skills. So I took my knowledge, applied it to that formula, and that's how you start to influence people. Then I realized, now that I'm on the sales side, it was very similar to my dating record in high school. For every 10 girls I asked out, one said yes.
Oh, jeez.
And she usually felt sorry for me. So you get 10 engagements, you feel good about them, you usually sell two.
Oh, my God.
So you got used to that whole process that, you may have 10 people interested, but only 2 or 3 actually sign.
Really, Phil? That's
But here's the cool thing I did learn, which I was always proud of.
Uh-huh.
Even if they didn't sign a deal with IBM, I knew I helped them in some way.
Yeah.
Because I always brought them back to it. I can remember just Greg Josefowicz today, 1991. Gillispie, start with the customer, start with the customer, start with the customer. Whether it was working with 7-Eleven in Taiwan or Netto in Denmark or Cencosud, okay, what's going on with your customer? Why are sales off? Let's start there. And we would just dig into it. And then the rest would just follow course.
Wow. So you've seen and done a lot. You've been a lot of places. I mean, when you start reeling off different countries and things like that, it's almost hard to even fathom. But you did it. And now, like you said, hey, I started my own thing. So I asked about the transition, pulling the lever to influencing. That's big company and big company. Now you're in a small entrepreneurial gig. What is that like?
So it's actually refreshing because we don't have any bureaucracy. At IBM, we call it the blue goo, and Microsoft had a different name for it. And we all laugh about it because in our new company here, there's people from IBM and Microsoft, one guy from Google, one guy from used to be at Kroger.
Yeah,
and we laugh because we can make decisions very quickly. So we all enjoy that, and we're able to impact people a lot quicker than we were before because our cost structure is so low.
sure.
We're about a third of the cost of other people. But what we realized, James, was what people wanted to talk to us about was, first of all, our experience, right? And then secondly, what they want to talk to us about was our experience, and then our experience and how we could bring that to life for their companies. As soon as no matter who it is, you sit down and start talking to them about how's your customer experience, your social experience. You're talking a common language. They understand my experience or Lisa Griego's experience at Procter & Gamble or other people's experience. And then that gets us in the door. And then we're able to solve their solutions a lot quicker, or I should say solve their problems a lot quicker with solutions that cost about a third less. So we've been doing it for about a year, and we're all enjoying it. There is the downside. I mean, you don't have the capital that you had with the Microsoft or IBM, right? So you're looking for investor funding money to help you fuel stuff, and then you have some requirements there, or you're asking a customer to partner with you with it. But the reward side of it, we all truly enjoy. You're able to move quicker, you make your decisions quicker, and then you're actually still impacting the customer.
Wow. Well, Bill, you've taken us on a whirlwind tour of your career, so we appreciate it. I'm going to let you take a breath, get something to drink or whatever, and let's come up for air. Finally, coming up for air. One thing that you've sprinkled throughout the conversation is Gretchen. So I'm sure you'll talk about her, but can you talk about family, talk about where you live, things like that?
Grew up in Chicago. I have two sisters. My older sister was a nurse for 44 years. My younger sister still works at Gillispie. She just celebrated 40 years at Gillispie.
Nice.
She's a receiving clerk, so it's still in her blood and stuff like that. We're all very tight. Dad passed away a couple years ago. Mom's 88 and still kicking, so we're a very tight family. We talk, text, pretty much on a daily basis about life and what's going on. But it was also, my parents set a foundation for very early, James, that you give back, you help your neighbor, you volunteer. So we were volunteering at a very young age. Went to a high school that was a third Hispanic, third African American, third white. So understood life very early. This is how it's going to be. And back in the 70s, that's when a time where white people were putting their kids in white schools only. And my dad said, absolutely not. This is life. They're going to understand life, and they're going to go to that school, because once you get out of school, that's what they're going to be dealing with. And so very good foundation. Our foundation early was built on Jesus, giving back and helping people. And we never hesitated to help a neighbor, to volunteer, or do something for someone else. And we also had a good time. We were a pretty tight family the whole time.
Sure.
Both of my parents grew up extremely poor. So meals were important to us. Family vacations were important to us. Celebrating life was always important to us. So it was a great opportunity. And like I said earlier, Dad was the enforcer in the family, pushing me to do better. Mom was more the loving hand. So when Dad pushed me too far, Mom was there to pick me up and say, hey, it's going to be okay to move on.
Sure. And Gretchen, where you live currently?
So Gretchen, we had been there 16 years, and Gretchen probably saved my life. What I mean by that? She understood multiple sclerosis, the problems with it, and she knew I had to make changes in my life. But she didn't dictate them to me, James. She didn't force them on me. She would just start to bring up ideas. Hey, why don't we try this thing called a smoothie that has spinach and kale in it? She would put a little ice cream in it so I would eat it. And so if you look at over the last 16 years, especially the last 7 years, because the last 7 years, I've been to the doctor 269 times. And she's been the force. Besides and here's the strange stuff. MS has been quiet, but I was diagnosed with diabetes, ulcerative colitis, 3 different forms of arthritis. I had all in 1 year, prostate cancer. And so all these things kept going wrong, but Gretchen was the force that's kept me positive. We'd always talk about options. And even after 269 visits, I'm still going, and it's because of her. Interesting story, we're meeting with my MS doctor, who I spent almost 22 years with before he passed away. And Gretchen would come to every visit. And then we're talking about, I just got diagnosed with prostate cancer, and Gretchen said something, and I cut her off. I was very rude to her. And then Dr. Anderson cut me off and said, do you realize the only reason why you are alive today is because of her?
Wow.
And just put it out, that just puts it all in perspective. Yeah. The life changes she's been able to make for me, keep me positive and everything else. Yeah, you talk about the true soulmate during good times and then more bad times, James. She's never given up.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, last question for you. I know you go, because you're in Florida. Yes. I know you go back to Chicago a lot. Why are you going back to Chicago?
We started a homeless ministry 12 years ago. Gretchen said, hey, what do you want to do for your 50th birthday? And I said, let's go to a homeless ministry and have the party there and serve dinner. We didn't know it at the time, but it was the Holy Spirit talking to us, saying, you need to do something else with your life. And I expect more out of you. So we did it. It was a great experience for us. And then we just started serving out of our condo in Chicago. Our organization's called Hitting the Streets. We cook 50 meals in our condo and then go pass them out on the streets. Over the last 4 years, we have grown exponentially. So after the last 4 years, we have served 191,000 meals, and we serve them to 28 shelters throughout Chicago. And we do it once a month. We started Sarasota about 2 years ago, and we continued to grow. And I wouldn't be surprised here if you and I are talking 5 years from now, we're talking about how we've provided 1 million meals to people in Chicago, Sarasota, and across the country.
That's incredible. I mean, it's kind of like full circle, though, because you think about, like you said, your foundation and what your parents taught you. And then you talk about like what you saw with the gangs and what you saw, at that 47th Street store, and then, everything, the MS and so on. It's just kind of what you do on this. I don't want to even say on the side, it's part of you.
Yeah. Mom and dad built the foundation, right? And then we just built from there and kept it going. And then we're just open to new ideas that come, James. The Holy Spirit's going to talk to you in different ways, and it's going to make you very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But that's the direction you got to go, and that's what we've done. And it's also a little bit selfish, James, because we do feel really good about ourselves when we're done.
Sure.
Right? And at the end of that day, when there's 6,000 meals going out that door, you're like, man, we accomplished something good today. 6,000 people will have a meal today because of us, and then 6,000 people, that's usually the only meal they're going to get for today because of what we did today. So we feel good about it.
Well, you definitely followed that word of advice way back when you had MS, and that's do something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a Matthew West song. It's called Do Something. And what he talks about, it was one of our theme songs for Team Gillispie, but what he talks about is all these problems are happening in this world. And he said, God, why don't you do something? All these problems are happening in this world. God, why don't you do something? And then God answers him and says, I did. I created you. And so it's been at the heart of what we've done. So
that's the perfect way to close. Bill, it's been awesome having you on the show. Thank you for joining us and sharing so many different experiences and insights.
You bet, James. Always appreciate talking with you.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've just listened to another amazing episode of ARCast. Please look forward to more interesting people just like Bill in the weeks to come. And please also don't forget to share ARCast with your colleagues. So for feedback, topic suggestions, or if you want to be on the show, just like Bill, please go down to www.catman.global/ARCast. I just need you to scroll down to the bottom of the screen. There's a form down there. It comes directly to me once you fill it out, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Today's episode was recorded at Studio Xerxes in Minnesota. Our theme music is brought to you by Bryant Lowry. And a special thanks to my friends at the Association of Retail and Consumer Professionals for their promotion and management. Well, that's it for today. I'm James Jackson signing off, and we'll see you on our next episode. Bye.